Committee on Investigation will come to order. We welcome our two witnesses, Admiral Linda Fagan and Master Chief Jones. I will make an opening statement, then turn to the ranking member. We will introduce the witnesses and then hear their testimony. Nearly 6 months ago, when we began this investigation, we were assured that the problem of sexual assault in the Coast Guard was a thing of the past, that mishandling of problems of sexual assault and harassment were over, and that cooperation would be full and complete. Unfortunately, we have found the opposite to be true. In fact, problems of sexual assault and harassment in the Coast Guard are by no means a problem of the past. They are very much a present, ongoing, persistent, and unacceptably prevalent problem. And the mishandling of abuse complaints seems intolerably common. We've received reports from almost 40 whistleblowers just in the last few months that attest to this ongoing problem. And unfortunately, the evidence points to a culture of cover-up continuing, as exemplified by the resistance to producing for us documents that very specifically and importantly should be part of this investigation. We are not hypothesizing about the Coast Guard claiming that the problem is one of the past. In fact, it's in a document that we have. It is a handwritten document that accompanied a memorandum arguing that Operation Fouled Anchor should not be revealed. And we began this inquiry in the wake of the news, in fact, that Operation Fouled Anchor, the Coast Guard internal investigation into decades of unaddressed sexual assault and sexual harassment, had been kept hidden from Congress. In fact, it was hidden from the public as well as Congress for 3 years. In deciding to keep Operation Fouled Anchor out of the public view, the Coast Guard leaders believed, as these handwritten notes on documents obtained by this subcommittee show, that, in fact, the problem was one of the past. The question is, what will the Coast Guard do about it now in the present? What specific action? We're beyond good intentions and statements of doing the right thing. We are now expecting action. And what we know from Operation Fouled Anchor and the way that it was concealed is that our investigation has shown a deep moral rot within the Coast Guard now, one that prioritizes cronyism over accountability, silence over survivors. And the whistleblowers who came to us just 6 months ago and testified before us described that culture of cover-up that led to their cases being dismissed or degraded or disregarded or treated as trivial administrative matters. The most recent of the whistleblowers who's come forward is Shannon Norenberg. She was the official at the Academy responsible for response to sexual assault complaints. And in a letter to us stating that she would resign, she said the following: "The Coast Guard lied to me. Worse than that, they used me to lie to victims, used me to silence victims, and used me in a coordinated effort to discourage victims of sexual assault at the Academy from speaking to Congress about their assaults and about the Coast Guard's investigation of cases." I don't think in my 13 years in the United States Senate and 25 years in law enforcement, I've seen a statement as concisely damning as the one that Ms. Norenberg has sent to us. But she's only one of a great number. Another of the whistleblowers wrote to us recently saying, quote, "I can say with absolute certainty that at every single duty station I was assigned to, that I either personally experienced bullying, hazing, and harassment, or either bore witness to or learned of others being treated inappropriately or unfairly. These forms of harassment include, but are not limited to, sexual assault." These statements reflect a broken culture, not at some point in the past, but again, right now, in the present. Last month, an incendiary email was widely circulated to current Coast Guard personnel and leadership with allegations about the Coast Guard's recent mishandling of a sexual assault and harassment case. Instead of addressing these claims directly, the Coast Guard removed it from the inboxes of personnel, though not before the allegations could go viral on the internet. A month earlier, the Coast Guard attempted to suppress the survivors' story talkers videos. These are videos with accounts of whistleblower experiences, survivors' victimization. And the reason it was suppressed was, quote, "It could continue to exacerbate the narrative that the Coast Guard is in a sexual assault crisis now." That's just a couple of months ago. And equally concerning is the way that the Coast Guard has responded to our requests. Just one example. It is refusing to provide us with documents deemed, quote, "sensitive," end quote, which is another word for embarrassing. This situation demands unsparing truth-telling, following the evidence where it leads, and being willing to face that truth, even though it may be embarrassing, to friends, colleagues, predecessors, and current leadership. I'm grateful to Admiral Fagan for being here today, along with Master Chief Heath Jones. And I've said before to her, I've said publicly that I hope that we can begin a different era in the Coast Guard, but it will take facing the truth and disclosing it. There's an obligation to survivors, to the public, as well as to this committee to be fully forthcoming. Now, I know that the Commandant will make reference to the document dump of yesterday. I refer to it as a document dump because 1,000 pages of documents were provided in a form that is very difficult to decipher and interpret. Document dump is the word that's often used to describe the tactic of providing a ton of documents when timing and substance make it duplicative, redundant, and difficult to analyze. So we would like more cooperation from the Coast Guard. I have enormous respect and admiration for the Coast Guard, for all that it's done for the country, for its great contributions to our national security and its storied history. I've been a strong supporter of the Academy and of the museum that we hope will, in fact, commemorate and celebrate that history in New London. But for right now, we need a commitment, again, not just in words, but in actions, that this problem will be addressed effectively. And we will be asking questions, I am sure, about that commitment to action and to ending the broken culture, which is a culture of concealment that in many respects is as deeply troubling as the instances of abuse and assault themselves. With that, I'll turn to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that my written opening statement be entered in the record. We just commemorated Memorial Day. I personally attended a ceremony at the Milwaukee War Memorial. It's called the Field of Flags, 27,316 Wisconsinites have paid the ultimate price, over 1 million Americans. We commemorated the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I feel that the men and women that serve us in the military are just the finest among us. Just being able to step up the plate and make that sacrifice, be willing to serve, is honorable. And again, I can't express my gratitude enough to those who do that. I wish, as we started this investigation, I wish at this point I could say that the chairman's just incorrect. He's overstating the case. But I can't say that. I was hoping that things were turning around, that this was in the past. I can't say that's the truth. I was hoping that the assurances given us months ago that they took that everybody in the Coast Guard took this seriously, that they're going to be completely transparent. They had to change the culture, and they recognize that the only way to change the culture is through disclosure and accountability. I wish all that was true, but it hasn't turned out to be that way. We were told that there were 25 to 30,000 pages of responsive documents. We received about 17,000, and I did talk to an admiral yesterday. It wasn't the most pleasant conversation, and I suggested the only way to get through this hearing with integrity is to turn over the remaining of those documents unredacted. We obviously didn't get thousands. Apparently we've got about 1,000 pages, but in a redacted form. This is what we get. There's a good one. This is not full transparency. And I've been doing investigations now for a number of years. This isn't why I came to the Senate, but I got put into this role. And you almost think that they must provide conferences or workshops for members of the executive branch, how to avoid complying with congressional oversight requests. It's the exact same runaround, the exact same runaround. Again, we're going to take it seriously. You're going to be fully transparent. We're going to come clean. And, well, we can't show you that. That's a sensitive document. So why don't you come on in camera and you can review it. Can't take copies. You can take some notes. It's just all part of the runaround. It's all part of running out the clock. And I know certainly yesterday in my phone call with the Admiral, he could see the growing frustration on my part of how, and this is on a bipartisan basis. This is, departments, agencies within both administrations, both Democrat and Republican, just completely ignore our constitutional responsibility and, quite honestly, their responsibility to provide these documents and this information to Congress, which means to the American public, American people. This has to get fixed. And I appreciate that the chairman has been dogged in his pursuit of this. I think it's going to require subpoenas, requires a hearing like this to lay this all out. I wish it didn't have to be so. I wish all those assurances would have been true, but they haven't been. So again, I'm I'm not looking forward to this hearing, I'm not, but it's absolutely necessary. And the sooner that the Coast Guard comes clean, becomes fully transparent, holds people accountable, as unpleasant as that will be, the only way you can change the culture, the only way this can be fixed, and that the finest among us can feel safe at the academy and in service to this country, is with truth, transparency, and accountability. That's what we're trying to do in this committee, is provide a forum for that kind of accountability. So again, I appreciate you doing this investigation, this hearing, and I just hope and pray that the truth is revealed and accountability is restored and integrity is restored. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Johnson. I'll introduce the witnesses. The Honorable Admiral Linda Fagan is the 27th Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. Prior to assuming her duties as Commandant, Admiral Fagan served as the Vice Commandant, the Commander of the Pacific Area, and the Deputy Commandant for Operations of Coast Guard Defense Forces. Admiral Fagan, a Coast Guard Academy graduate, is the longest-serving active-duty Marine Safety Officer. Master Chief Heath Jones, Master Chief Petty Officer, is accompanying her for questions. He is the most senior enlisted member of the Coast Guard and the principal advisor to the Commandant on all personnel matters. As is our custom, I will administer the oath. If you would please rise. Do you swear that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you. Commandant, if you would please proceed with your statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Johnson, distinguished members of the subcommittee. I ask that my written testimony be entered into the record.
Without objection.
The Coast Guard is on an unprecedented journey to ensure every member of our workforce experiences the workplace culture they expect and deserve. As this subcommittee is aware, Operation Fouled Anchor was an investigation into past sexual assaults at the Coast Guard Academy. That investigation also began to reveal that in some places throughout our service, we've failed to ensure a culture that is safe for all, where every member feels connected, supported, and free from harm. Many people in and out of government have shared some version of, well, you know, this kind of thing happens all across society. And my response to that is, it is unacceptable. Not in my Coast Guard. Sexual assault and sexual harassment are crimes that harm our members, and it is not who we are. I've met with victims, heard their stories firsthand, shared their pain. I recognize the harm they experienced, the trust that was broken, and the difficult journey they undertook to be heard. As painful as reliving these traumatic events can be, many of these victims courageously and publicly stepped forward, including to this subcommittee, to share their stories so that we can effect change. To the victims, survivors, I am truly sorry for what you have had to go through. Thank you for your courage and efforts to make our service better. To those victims who've not yet come forward or feel unheard, I understand your reluctance. There's nothing more important to me than earning your trust in our service's ability to respond and support you. I also want to repeat here today, our failure to share the report with Congress was a mistake that prevented appropriate oversight and further eroded trust. This subcommittee and others, as well as the Inspector General, are investigating the Coast Guard's handling of the report. We continue to cooperate with these investigations. We've devoted significant resources and have been fully responsive to the subcommittee and will continue to do so. We conducted the broadest possible sweep of records, reviewing nearly 2 million pages, and all responsive documents have been provided to this committee. More details about the Coast Guard's efforts to support your investigation are in my written testimony. I cannot change the past, but as the Commandant today, I reaffirm to our workforce, past and present, that I remain steadfast in my commitment to making lasting cultural change. Over the past 10 months, I've taken decisive actions to address not only the issues revealed by the investigation, but the broader issues of culture and workplace climate, This includes efforts to root out toxic behaviors and regain the trust of the workforce. We've consulted with experts in cultural change, in the neuroscience of trauma, and in sexual misconduct training, prevention, and accountability. And we're incorporating in our actions the insight of victims and survivors, as well as input from this subcommittee. Together with Congress, we implemented the Coast Guard Safe to Report policy so that any member who reports sexual assault is not punished for minor collateral violations. When victims pointed out that their voices were not reaching the leadership, we created an enterprise victim advocate to amplify victims' voices and address service-wide issues. We know that accountability for past misconduct is a critical part of justice for survivors. We're fully leveraging all of our updated authorities from Congress. For example, we've implemented a new policy on last grade held determinations to reduce retirement pay grades where past misconduct is discovered. We continue to vigorously investigate timely reports of criminal misconduct. We've also been working to improve accountability for non-criminal misconduct while providing support to victims. To ensure our culture aligns to our core values, I initiated a comprehensive effort across the workforce to understand how our people live our core values and to create clarity and alignment. There's more that we're doing and more that we want to do, and I will ask for your support and resourcing support to continue with the work and journey we've embarked on. Every expert we've consulted cautioned that culture change is not easy and it is not quick. But it is critical that we undertake this, and it's critical to our success as a service organization. We have started this work. I'm not shying away from this challenge. I know the people of the Coast Guard, and I know we are already rising to the challenge ahead. I'm confident this sustained effort will make the Coast Guard stronger, more resilient, and more responsive to our people and the public we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Commandant. We'll have rounds of 7 minutes each, and then a second round probably afterward. Commandant, have you taken action to separate any officer from the Coast Guard for retaliation against a survivor?
We have policies in place that create accountability around retaliation and retribution.
Have you actually separated anyone from the Coast Guard? Have you taken action to fire an officer?
I do not have a name in front of me. I have not done a comprehensive back review of all of the personnel actions. The answer is I don't know.
You don't know whether you have separated anyone or taken action to separate
We
someone?
separate our officers from the service for misconduct and for crimes all the time.
But I'm
Specific
talking
to
about retaliation.
I don't know.
Have you taken action against any member of your leadership for failure to act on a complaint of retaliation?
I personally, in my job as Commandant, have not been made aware of any officer who was guilty of retaliation, and so therefore I have not taken action. If there is an officer in the system who is found guilty of retaliation, I will ensure we act in accordance with policy and law.
That question, I think, is no as well. Let me ask you, with respect to retaliation, what proactive measures are you taking to prevent retaliation?
Some of the work that we're doing now as an organization, and when Fouled Anchor came to light last summer, we could have said this was just mishandling of sexual assault from the 80s to 2006 at the Academy. That is not how we've defined the problem. Sexual assault, sexual harassment are crimes. They'll be investigated as crimes and followed through. Retaliation, retribution, hazing, bullying, ostracizing, these are harmful behaviors that are road readiness, and that is part of the cultural work that we are embarked on to eliminate those harmful behaviors, create a culture intolerant of retaliation, intolerant of retribution, and where it does occur, ensure that we create
But what
accountability.
specific actions are you taking to prevent retaliation?
We have begun work across a number of different efforts, training at all levels in the organization, update to policy and procedures, clear guidance to my leaders, as commanding officers and OICs that retaliation and retribution will not be tolerated in the organization, and you must act to create accountability.
Are you aware that there are more survivors who leave the Coast Guard than perpetrators?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Senator. My goal is to create a culture in the organization where everyone is safe and is free from harmful behaviors, and so everyone has the experience that they deserve in this incredible organization. And we get that right more often than not.
Have you read the letter or statement that Shannon Norenberg submitted to this subcommittee?
I have not read her statement. I am aware of the reporting of her concerns. I confirmed yesterday that the allegations that Shannon brought forward will be part of the IG investigation. I do want to note, Shannon has been an incredible employee for us. She's made an incredible difference as a sexual assault advisor at the Coast Guard Academy. We are a smaller organization with her departure, but the allegations she has made will be part of the IG investigation.
You've seen public reports. Have you asked to see the document itself?
I have not. This just came to light yesterday, but I have not seen her statement.
Are you aware that as part of that report, she recounted that survivors were denied the opportunity to sign CG 6095? You're aware of that document, are you not?
Yeah, so I am cooperating with the IG investigation.
Well, I'm
with
talking
regard to
about
those
what you know.
I do not know the specifics of her allegation. This is part of the investigation that will be done by the IG. I'm fully cooperating with the IG, and if there's evidence of misconduct, we'll work in accordance with law and policy to ensure accountability.
And I apologize for interrupting, but my time is limited, so I'm going to ask you, you know what CG 6095 is, right? It enables veterans of the Coast Guard to have access to benefits and care from the VA. When that document is unsigned, they can't access the benefits. If they're denied the opportunity to sign that document, not only are they victims of sexual assault and survivors, but they are prevented from accessing the health care they need to deal with the trauma and other medical problems that may be resulting from it. And I find one of the most damning parts of her letter to be that those survivors evidently were denied that opportunity. What are you going to do to give those veterans the opportunity to access care and benefits?
I am committed to cooperating with the IG. We'll continue to work to understand what did or did not happen.
Is
And
the IG saying you can't give them the opportunity to sign CG 6095?
It is an ongoing investigation, and the IG has said this is while it is under investigation, I cannot initiate action. As soon as we are able to, I will ensure that any victim who's entitled to veterans benefits has access to those benefits. This allegation just came forward yesterday, and we were working with the IG to understand what happened, what didn't happen, and then we'll work to support victims. My priority is supporting victims.
When will the IG investigation be done?
You'll have to ask the IG, sir. I do
don't
not know.
know.
I don't know. I'm cooperating with the IG.
But in the meantime, survivors are denied medical care without any justification. I find that absolutely untenable and intolerable, and I think it will impact morale within the Coast Guard. Wouldn't you agree?
I continue to work with the IG, and I'm committed to providing support for victims, and will continue to work that issue forward. I don't want any victim to not get the support that they are entitled to.
The IG investigation, I submit respectfully, cannot be used as a shield for inaction. It cannot be used as an excuse for failing to address these ongoing problems. It cannot be used as a reason to refuse disclosure of documents to this subcommittee. And the IG has not asked you to refuse medical care or deny access or refuse documents to this committee, so far as I'm aware. I'm going to turn to the ranking member. We're going to hear strictly to the 7 minutes so that everybody gets a chance, and then we'll come back for another round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, there's an ongoing investigation is one of the primary excuses always used to prevent disclosure to Congress. So chalk that up to another one from the workshop. Comment on Fagan, did I hear you right? You testified that you've turned all the documents over to the committee?
We have been working in good faith with the committee, rolling production of documents. We began this process last summer, added people and resourcing to ensure that we're able to get into a regular production of documents. This is an unprecedented undertaking for the organization. There were just short of 2 million pages of documents that were initially looked at with regard to potentially being responsive to the issues that the subcommittee is interested in. We have turned over 18,000 pages of documents to the subcommittee responsive to the ask. That includes 91 reports of investigation from assaults that occurred at the Coast Guard Academy. I understand and we have done this consistent with advice from the General Counsel, consistent with protection of victim privacy and victim dignity, witness privacy, sensitive public health information, attorney-client privilege, and the pre-deliberation or pre-decisional documents.
Okay,
in those cases where the committee, we've offered in-camera review. It's a standing and open offer for in-camera review. Any one of the documents that you have, we welcome the opportunity to continue to work in good faith with the committee to provide the documents.
So, Bob, we haven't received all the documents.
You've received.
We have not received all the documents. They're still going under review.
We have completed the review. You've received all of the responsive documents.
One of the documents, and I asked you when we first met in my office, showed you an email. There was an attachment to that email. The attachment wasn't provided, and you made the commitment to provide us that attachment. I believe what that was an earlier version of the report, an earlier draft of the report on Operation Fouled Anchor. You committed to provide that. That has not been provided to us, correct?
Well, we'll work back through your committee. I know you've got the Fouled Anchor report, the final report.
Okay, again, part of our investigation would be to see earlier drafts in terms of what, again, I view this as a cover-up. So when you're investigating a cover-up, some of the documents you're going to want is, okay, we see the final report from a 5-year investigation. We're aware of the fact that that initial report, the initial draft, was 11 pages. It would be very interesting, I think, important for us to see what was cut out of that 11 pages to produce a 6-page report. So when can we expect to see the original drafts, the 11-page initial draft of the report?
I continue to work with my general counsel and am taking advice with regard to.
What excuse would be given to not turn over the initial draft of the report? If you want to be fully transparent, what could possibly prevent that from happening?
I continue to work in good faith with the committee to provide documents, and will provide
again. Good faith is always the excuse you hear. Who do you report to?
I report to Secretary Mayorkas.
Have you spoken to Secretary Mayorkas about this situation?
Yes.
What kind of interest has she shown in, let's face it, in this cover-up?
This is not a cover-up. I am committed to providing documents in good faith. This is an incredible organization, and I am committed to bringing the organization forward and making the culture change necessary, and I understand that there's a responsiveness to the committee. I remain committed to that, and I continue to work with my own lawyers and the department to ensure that we are providing documents consistent with executive branch and constitutional, the constitutional process with regard to accommodation.
Again, you have to understand, I've heard this time and time again over multiple investigations. It's the exact same excuses given all the time in terms of not being responsive. You talk 2 million pages. Well, we've already cut it down to somewhere between 25 and 30. You've turned over 17, but in particular, when there's a document that you request, from a U.S. Senator to the Commandant of the Coast Guard. And the Commandant of the Coast Guard said, yeah, we'll provide that document, and it's not provided. And again, I'm not talking 2 million pages. I'm not talking 25,000 pages. I'm talking about an 11-page initial draft of the report on an investigation that took 5 years, that was then covered up for a number of years, and I can't get that 11 pages. We can't get that 11 pages. Why?
I remain committed.
Have you read that full 11-page draft report?
I have not read the pre-decisional 11-page report. I have read the final fouled anchor report that was closed out in February of 2020.
You haven't been inquisitive enough to read the initial draft?
I am focused on...
There's obviously a reason I want to see it. There's obviously a reason I'm making a point of it in this hearing. I think it could be very revealing in terms of what the Coast Guard at that point in time decided, well, we don't want to include that. That might harm our institution. That might be embarrassing. So let's leave that out. We'll give them these 6 pages. We'll leave these 5 pages out. So if I get nothing out of this hearing today, is I'd like a complete commitment to show us that full 11-page draft report. If we have to review it in camera, fine. I can go read 11 pages in camera. It's a little more difficult to do another 10 or 20,000 pages. That's why we need these documents here, so that, we can search them. We can get them on our computer. We can search for key phrases. I mean, there's a way you do these investigations. In-camera reviews is not a very good way of doing it, but I'll make an exception for these 11 pages. Can I get that commitment?
I will commit to providing those 11 pages in camera review.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hassan.
I'm going to move, oh, there it goes. Thank you, Chair Blumenthal and Ranking Member Johnson, for holding this really important hearing, and thank you, Admiral Fagan and Master Chief Jones, for appearing before the subcommittee today and for your service to our country. I remain deeply disturbed, as my colleagues are, by the Coast Guard's response to sexual assault and harassment within the service. While most of the Coast Guard's failures preceded your leadership, the agency has also been slow to implement changes under your command. You have missed targets for implementing recommendations from the Accountability and Transparency Review. In addition, you were slow to inform service members that non-disclosure agreements did not preclude them from coming forward as whistleblowers to Congress or other appropriate entities. It's also becoming more clear that the Coast Guard's culture problem widely exceeds its academy, and the service needs to do better to protect all of its members. To the brave women and men who commit their lives to their country, to keeping us all safe, secure, and free, too many of you were subjected to sexual assault and harassment, and it is unacceptable that the Coast Guard covered up its failures rather than get you the help that you deserve. So I thank you all for your bravery and for your willingness to discuss your experiences. Now, Admiral Fagan, I was going to start with a question that I think you actually answered in your opening. I was going to ask, does the Coast Guard have a sexual assault and harassment problem? But I take it from your testimony that you agree that it does.
The Coast Guard reflects society. Any sexual assault in the Coast Guard is one too many. I am committed to creating a culture in the environment that is intolerant, not just of assault and harassment, but retaliation and retribution.
So you agree that the Coast Guard has a sexual assault and harassment problem. Now, let's move to another issue. According to public posts online, the Coast Guard Sexual Assault Prevention, Response, and Recovery Program planned to film and release videos featuring victims discussing what happened to them. The videos were supposed to be posted to an internal network this past April in recognition of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this storyteller program was modeled after a similar program done by the United States Air Force. However, these videos were not posted until May 23rd, after an internal memo that recommended against sharing the videos was leaked. The internal memo said that these videos quote, could continue to exacerbate the narrative being advanced by some that the Coast Guard is in a sexual assault crisis, despite OFA, meaning Operation Fouled Anchor, including only historical cases of sexual assault at the Coast Guard Academy. The memo also notes, quote, interested congressional committees and personnel staffs are going to reach out to the Coast Guard and demand accountability, close quote. So Chair Blumenthal, I'd ask that this internal memo be entered into the record. Do I have permission, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Yes. Thank you. To me, this memo reflects continued problems with the Coast Guard's commitment to accountability and transparency. It also shows an unwillingness to fully confront ongoing allegations of sexual assault and harassment. Admiral Fagan, when did you become aware of this Storyteller program? Were you consulted in the decision on whether to share these videos? And are you concerned that some agency leadership apparently feared accountability?
I did not become aware of the Storyteller program until after the interviews had already been made. I'm fully supportive. The pain that the victims have carried in silence for far too long, it is important for victim stories to be out there. I am not afraid of the victim stories being shared and shared publicly.
But clearly some in your organization were. It's reflected in this memo. So were you consulted in the decision on whether to share these videos? And are you concerned that some agency leadership apparently feared accountability?
I was not consulted, and I am myopically focused on creating culture around accountability, not just for senior leaders, but at every level of the organization, and that extends into policy and application.
So I will take that as a commitment that if you have agency leadership whose judgment reflected in this memo was that they wanted to instruct folks not to share these videos because they were scared of accountability and of Congress pushing the service more on this issue, I take it then that you will take action against agency or to hold agency leadership accountable for their decisions to keep these videos away from the public.
So those videos have been released. I remain committed to transparency and accountability. We are doing culture work in the organization. I'm proud of how much we've accomplished in the last nearly year since we had.
But let me be clear, and I'm interrupting, I'm sorry, because my time is limited. As recently as this spring, the culture among senior leadership in the United States Coast Guard was such that they decided to withhold these videos because they were concerned about accountability. This is very recent. So the culture change you are attempting is not permeating to your senior leadership as far as we can tell from this memo, because the videos were not released until this memo was leaked. So you've got work to do.
I am committed to the journey. The culture that is in place in the organization today has taken time to get there. It will take me time to turn the culture. We will become an organization that is intolerant of harmful behaviors, that is myopically focused on transparency and creates accountability for every member of the organization.
I thank you for that commitment. I will note that incidents like this one, where videos were prepared, there was a plan, they were going to be released at least to an internal site in April during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. They were pulled back because of concerns about the way it would look for the Coast Guard and that it might subject the Coast Guard to further inquiry from the United States Congress. That reluctance indicates a real failure of leadership, and it indicates a culture that still does not understand the significance or is committed to the significance of rooting out sexual assault and harassment. So again, I'll turn it back to the chair, but the Coast Guard has work to do here, and we need to understand how it was that a leadership group that is supposed to be committed to changing the culture took the steps it did to keep these videos away from the public. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Hassan. Did I understand correctly, Commandant, that you have not reviewed those documents that were withheld?
Which document,
The
Senator?
documents that were offered for review in camera. You know what in camera means, by the way.
Yes, I do.
You can't take notes, you can't talk about them, you can't make them public, you can't use them. You haven't read them.
The 11-page pre-decisional.
Well,
I have
whatever
not
number
read.
there may be more than 11 pages.
No, I have not.
I'm-
But
I'm
we are
astonished
working
that
in
you
good
haven't-
faith with the committee to be responsive to the investigation and the matters at hand. I have a staff of 10 that have been working nearly around the clock since last summer to create and produce the documents on a rolling basis to be responsive to the committee.
You haven't reviewed them, but let me tell you, those documents have no victim names, they have no classified information, they have nothing, absolutely nothing that would be privileged. What they have is evidence of bad choices and poor judgment that would be embarrassing, which is the reason they've been called sensitive. That's just one example of documents that have been withheld. And just so the world understands, we've raised this issue repeatedly with you in letters, in phone calls. We're not playing gotcha here. And what I want, and I think that Senator Johnson alluded to it, is a commitment that these letters will be turned over to us. Will you make that commitment?
I continue to commit to the committee to work through the process in good faith to provide access to all the information necessary for the committee to complete its investigation.
You know, I'm a lawyer. I used to be a prosecutor. I know when defendants or parties claim privileges or reasons for non-disclosure. But I also know it's up to the client, when all's said and done, to make decisions. You're the leader. These decisions are yours. And you say in your testimony, and I respect you for saying it, that there are two themes going through the Coast Guard's dealings with this issue. Quote, first, many Coast Guard members are not currently experiencing the safe and empowering work environment that they rightfully expect and deserve. Second, there is a noticeable erosion of trust in the Coast Guard leadership. I think disclosure is important to meeting both of those issues, and non-disclosure simply aggravates the challenges that you face. And when you say, I think it was in your testimony and in response to Senator Hassan, that the problems of sexual assault in the Coast Guard reflect sexual assault occurring generally in our society, we hold our military services to a higher standard. We don't say, oh, well, there's sexual assault on college campuses, therefore it's okay at the Coast Guard Academy. Now, I know you're not saying it's okay, but it demands stronger action because you are a military service that has earned and deserves our respect for the great contribution that you make to our country and that your graduates commit themselves to doing. So failure to disclose, I think, has ramifications throughout the Coast Guard and more generally in the way that the public views your service. Let me ask you about the 33 directed actions recommended in the Accountability and Transparency Review. You say in your testimony that you've taken 33 separate actions. The Government Accountability Office in February found that you have done only 5 of those directed actions completely. Are you saying that you've now completed all of the others?
So, first, I'd like to affirm, I hold my workforce to a higher standard in society. Sexual assault, sexual harassment is a crime. It has no place in the Coast Guard, and we're going to continue to move to become intolerant of those harmful behaviors. The Accountability and Transparency Review was a 90-day review that was done to start to build the roadmap ahead for the journey that we need to take as an organization. There were 33 directed actions, and we were in various forms of implementation. We've done things like create an enterprise victim advocate. We'd heard from victims that they didn't feel like they had a voice with senior leadership. We're the only organization, the only military that is an enterprise-wide victim advocate. We've implemented the Safe to Report policy in advance of when Congress notified us that victims were concerned about reporting. We've already put in place a Safe to Report policy. We're establishing a new Sentinel Transformation and Readiness Training Week for our members as they complete boot camp. We've changed characterization, how we characterize service policy with regard to those who've been had substantiated cases of sexual assault. We're ensuring that victims are able to be present and provide written statements at administrative separation proceedings. We've signed an MOU with other military service academies. I've added company officers and company chiefs at the Coast Guard Academy. We've updated the Cadet Swab Summer program. We've changed the cadet conduct system. We are taking action. The work is not done. This is work that we will continue to endeavor, but we have not waited, and we have continued to invest. I need to come to Congress and ask for resourcing support. People,
How much
HRIT
do
system.
you need in terms of resources that you don't have now?
I need to come back with a more comprehensive answer to that. Coast Guard Investigative Service officers.
You know, now is the time, Commandant. We're reviewing the 2025 budget.
So I commit to you in short order to give you a more definitive answer. I know I need a new HR IT system. The personnel system that we use from a computer basis for the Coast Guard is old. It doesn't provide the kind of clarity and insights that I need to be responsive to you, and we need to make those investments.
I mentioned 33 directed actions recommended by the Accountability and Transparency Review. How many have you completed?
They are all in some, I don't have the exact number in front of me because I don't view this work as ever being done. We are going to continue to endeavor to invest in this
established
work.
benchmarks for you, and you're saying you don't know how many you've completed.
I will have my staff come over and give you an exact accounting of exactly where we are in the 33. But the point I'm making, those 33 directed actions are an investment in the broader work that the Coast Guard is doing to actually drive culture change.
Senator Johnson.
Commandant, how often have you talked to Secretary Mayorkas about Operation Fouled Anchor?
I've talked to him on several occasions about it. The department is aware of Fouled Anchor, aware of the, basically aware of Fouled Anchor.
So he was the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security when Operation Fouled Anchor, was implemented, correct? Was he aware of it then, do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. How often have you talked to Secretary Mayorkas about this committee's investigation of Operation Fouled Anchor and the sexual assault issues in the Coast Guard?
When I have opportunity to meet with him, it's not on every occasion, but we have talked about this committee, how the criticality of oversight, being responsive to the committee, and continuing to work with he and the staff at the department to ensure that we're responsive and compliant.
So is your assessment that he takes this investigation pretty seriously and wants to be responsive?
Yeah, he continues to, again, he and the staff continue to support the Coast Guard and work with us as we continue to work with the committee to be responsive.
So you're aware the Department of Homeland Security has something like 240,000 employees, right?
Yes.
Has he offered any personnel, investigatory personnel, paper crunchers, people in their FOIA office to help you respond to this if you views this as a pretty serious issue?
So I have not asked him. I brought staff on, I brought contract staff on, and did not ask the department specifically for additional FOIA
So
personnel.
Secretary Mayorkas hasn't viewed this investigation seriously enough to offer you help then in this?
He has absolutely offered help and advice from his staff, and we continue to be engaged with the department on the matter.
Are DHS attorneys, are they involved in redacting or approving release of documents?
We continue to work with the department and the attorneys at the department as we work through document production, redaction, and then release to the committee.
One of the reasons I ask that is, we now know in testimony from Dr. Morins and HHS that the FOIA officer, the person in charge of actually providing information due to FOIA requests, they seek her advice on how to avoid producing documents under FOIA. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
I am, and that's what concerns me. Are you familiar with Caitlin Morrow?
Yes.
So she entered the Coast Guard Academy in 2004. She left in 2005 after she was sexually assaulted by a classmate who is still in the Coast Guard. She appeared before this committee. One of her requests, and I thought it was a pretty reasonable one, is to just get her records. She still hasn't got her records, has she?
She has gotten her records. As I understand, one of the frustrations for victims is they are unable, through the Freedom of Information Act, to receive unredacted copies of their own report of investigations. I welcome the opportunity to work with the committee to revise the law that is the Freedom of Information Act and provide an opportunity for victims to have their own redacted reports of investigation. I'm bound by law as it is currently prescribed in FOIA, but again, welcome the opportunity. It seems like that is a righteous thing to do for victims, is to ensure that they've got access to their own information.
Well, I'd certainly like your commitment to, personal commitment to make sure that she gets to see her full unredacted records.
Every victim has access, they are entitled to their reports and access as long as, their specific report of investigation.
Well, I've been told that there are extensions granted on this, and still she doesn't have that access, not the full access she wants. So I guess my final comment is I would, right after this hearing, I would contact Secretary Mayorkas and make a request for significant help in terms of personnel to comply with the committee's document requests. That's what I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, both enlisted recruits and cadets at the Academy participate in intense basic training when they begin their time in the Coast Guard. These trainings are designed to test recruits and cadets physically and mentally, and they are the first time recruits and cadets are introduced to the Coast Guard's culture and code of conduct. According to Coast Guard briefings, there is minimal discussion of sexual misconduct and victim services during basic training for enlisted recruits. I understand that basic training is stressful and exhausting, and that the Coast Guard was perhaps rightfully worried that seminars in the middle of basic training wouldn't receive the attention that they deserve. But I am really concerned that the Coast Guard is missing a major opportunity to improve its culture and instill core values of respect and self-discipline into new service members right from the beginning. How could the Coast Guard better leverage basic training and its SWAB summer to improve its culture and set clear expectations regarding sexual misconduct among recruits and cadets from the very moment that they join the Coast Guard?
So let me briefly answer, and then if you allow permission, I'll let Master Chief talk specifically to Cape
Sure.
May. Every opportunity we have to train and enculturate both the enlisted workforce, cadets, and frankly, reinforce for officers and our senior enlisted. Training, policy, leadership, all of that is on the table to continue to reinforce culture, how we live our culture, how we become intolerant of harmful behaviors, and ensuring that there's no ambiguity as far as what is that and how is it lived every day. And we're adding a very specific week at the end of Cape May to address exactly this so that there's no ambiguity on what our core values mean of honor, respect, and devotion to duty.
Thank you.
If I may, Senator, thanks
Yes.
for that question. The program that the Commandant's referring to is our Sentinel Transition and Readiness Training Program, and we're going to start our first beta test of it in October, which will be after recruits graduate from Cape May. From their basic training we take them, we're going to move them off-site to another location for a week that is focused 100% on the tie of their personal values, morals, ethics to our Coast Guard core values, ethics, and how to identify behaviors that take the conversation left of assault, left of harassment, left of bullying, to the behaviors where we can train those out of folks. And furthermore, that's going to be every Coast Guard recruit's going to get that. We're also investing into our this type of training and principles are going to be built into every A and C school that our members go to, both enlisted go to A school, and then all members go to C schools. It's going to be built into our enlisted performance qualifications and rating performance qualifications. It's going to be built into our enlisted evaluation system and our officer evaluation system so we can measure how the training is taking place. And we've recently also revamped our chief's performance qualifications for our chief's call initiation process to train the chiefs of today for what we need to lead our people.
So I appreciate this, but let me just try to be clear. During basic training itself, there's the possibility that somebody is going to be exposed to harassment or sexual misconduct, right? So how do they know during basic training, a time of incredible stress and exhaustion, how to go about reporting sexual misconduct? At what point does the Coast Guard really help recruits and cadets understand what their rights are from the get-go?
It starts day one, Senator. And it starts in Cape May day one, and it's sprinkled in throughout. The reason we feel the need to start this new program afterwards is they've had 8 weeks of basic military
Right.
instruction, so we really want to cement what they've been taught at Cape May and cement it into the program.
All right, that is helpful. Admiral, the Operation Fouled Anchor final report stated that Academy leadership, quote, did not adequately investigate alleged offenses as serious criminal matters and hold perpetrators appropriately accountable, close quote. While statutes of limitation or retirement may preclude prosecution, there are other ways for the Coast Guard to hold individuals accountable for their actions and provide justice to victims. For example, according to Coast Guard briefings, the service is considering pursuing a reduction in rank or grade for at least one individual who left the Coast Guard. It may be insufficient, but it would at least provide some measure of accountability. What steps is the Coast Guard taking to hold individuals accountable for sexual misconduct when they retire?
So in the case that you're referencing, I am ready to act on that case. The IG investigation needs to be completed before we're able to do that. In fact, we've asked recently to see whether we're able to proceed with regard to a board to determine a reduction in rank. As these investigations complete and as there are findings of misconduct consistent with policy and law, we will create that accountability. The last grade held board that I mentioned, that is authority I've clarified in policy that we will begin regularly reviewing and exercising that last grade held board. It impacts people's retirement pay grade,
Yes.
and we need to use the authorities that we have to create that accountability where misconduct has occurred.
Okay, I will follow up with you on that and follow up with you as well on the whole issue of the IG's investigation and your perception of constraints because of that IG investigation. I have one more question for this second round. Currently, most victim resources are located on land. Coast Guard policy does require at least one trained volunteer victim advocate on board during sea duty. In cases where a volunteer victim advocate is unavailable on board, though, commanding officers are tasked as victim advocates. In these instances, victims may fear coming forward or choose to wait until their sea duty concludes to report, which could mean weeks or months at sea with their assailant. What is the Coast Guard doing to improve victim services and access to confidential, independent resources such as volunteer victim advocates for cadets and enlisted members on sea duty?
So my enterprise victim advocate is here in the room, and I will ensure that we take that for action. Anybody at land or at sea should have access to a victim advocate,
Right.
appropriate access to a victim advocate, and I'll ensure that we're making progress so that they have that access.
Just reinforcing the very basic point when it comes to sexual assault and misconduct, a reporting chain that includes a superior officer is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Hassan. I want to follow up on a couple of your answers to Senator Hassan's questions. I understand that criminal prosecution may be difficult because of the lapse of time and the statute of limitations that may apply, but administrative action, either reprimand or diminishing rank or pay, is still possible. And you say you haven't done any of those things, correct?
For example, the last grade held board, we have, with regard to the specific case mentioned and a couple of the accused in the fouled anchor cases, we have not yet acted but have the authority to do that. I know I keep talking about the IG investigation, but as that concludes, that will provide insights into whether, sort of non-criminal misconduct occurred or not, and then we'll work to create what accountability, transparent, what are the administrative tools there, but I don't know what the IG is going to conclude.
Don't you have your own investigation?
No, I'm relying on the IG to do the investigation. And so Congress has authorized $1.5 million to the department for an independent third-party review. The department is close to finalizing that contract. That
Well, that's what I
independent
mean.
third-party
Haven't
review
you-
will be important.
Haven't you completed that review with the 1.5 million that has been provided?
No, they're in the process of contracting that independent third party now.
So you don't have any active investigation underway right now of your own?
No, I am working in full support of the IG and the committees and congressional oversight.
And as you know, an IG investigation can sometimes be held confidential. So if it is withheld from the public, only you and the IG would know, and maybe not even you. Can you commit to making public the IG investigation?
I commit to continuing to support and work with the IG process, and then we'll divulge information to the fullest extent that I am allowed
So you
based on
can't
what the
commit to
IG.
making anything public right now?
I'm working in full support of the IG committee. I want that. I want the information. I want those insights. I want it to be public. It is an important part of the accounting and the progress that this organization is making.
Don't you know enough now to at least reprimand the officials responsible for withholding and concealing the fouled anchor report from the United States Congress?
I continue to work in full support of the IG, and as that report concludes, we'll work to understand what misconduct occurred or didn't occur. At this point, I don't have any direct evidence of misconduct.
Do you know whether you don't have any evidence of misconduct?
No.
Really? The fouled anchor report was concealed and withheld? You agree with that?
We failed to disclose the fouled anchor report to Congress. That was a mistake. I can't go back and change that. I remain committed to moving the organization ahead. Our
But
primary.
someone made the decision, and in fact, we have, I'll ask the poster board be provided again. That decision was made on the basis of considerations that were discussed explicitly by the then Vice Commandant, Ray, after consulting with other leaders of the Coast Guard at the time. You were not in a position of command at the time, which gives you the opportunity to enable the Coast Guard to come clean. The pros and the cons. They decided the cons outweighed the pros, in part because no victim coming forward now. That was untrue. The problem is one of the past. That was untrue. Long-standing policy, no bright line. There was no justification for concealing this report other than avoiding embarrassment. That's not a mistake in the sense of inadvertent misplacing that report. They didn't just put it in someone's desk and lose track of it. They decided very explicitly and intentionally to withhold that report. That's misconduct, is it not?
I remain committed to the process and will work forward with the committee, the IG, the department, to ensure that we've got proper accountability.
Let me ask you, in April, the Coast Guard attempted to stop the publication of those videos that were referenced, eventually they were disclosed, but not until after the Coast Guard made an effort to suppress them. So I just want to clarify your responses to Senator Hassan. And then last month, an anonymous email spread throughout the Coast Guard community. The email alleged, quote, "The events that occurred resulted in this junior member experiencing further sexual harassment, retaliatory false reports, victim blaming, lowered evaluations, targeting, and silencing." End of quote. The email was highly inflammatory. The underlying existent incident, which took place within the past few years, was confirmed by the Coast Guard. This subcommittee was also informed by whistleblowers that shortly after this email was shared, it started to disappear from Coast Guard members' inboxes. We were told by the Coast Guard that was done because it was spam, in quotes, spam. I'm at a loss for understanding how an email alleging mishandling of sexual assault and subsequent retaliation was classified as spam and deleted from inboxes. Admiral Fagan, were you made aware of this email before it was deleted?
I am aware of the email. The allegations of sexual assault were fully investigated. They were referred to the Office of the Chief Prosecutor. We have stood up an Office of a Chief Prosecutor, consistent with the NDAA language. We're requiring that for the DoD military services, and we've made the move and investment to do that. The Office of the Chief Prosecutor referred the case back to the leadership at D8, and it is still an open matter of, it's still an open matter. I don't have the details of exactly where it's at, but it is still open.
Were you informed about the decision to delete it?
I was not informed. The email, you've seen it, it's highly, inflammatory, colorful. Whether it triggered an automatic spam, I don't know. We know about the email. We take those allegations seriously, and we're following through.
Let me ask you, have the number of reported cases of sexual assault and harassment increased from 2022 to 2023?
No, the reports to the Coast Guard of sexual assault have been relatively steady. As I said, one sexual assault is one too many. We need to move to drive that number down. In 2023, the number of reports to the organization was 185 or 186. But they've been fairly constant, and that's not acceptable. The number needs to go down.
And what were they in 2022?
2022, they were higher 6 years previously. I don't know. I'll get you the number. Here it is. 226 in 22.
And what's the rate for 2024? Are you going to exceed those numbers?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but happy to provide them to the committee, how many we've had reported to this point.
Well, I hope you will. I'm going to turn to Senator Johnson.
So, comment on Fagan, when were you first made aware of Operation Fouled Anchor?
I knew of the term fouled anchor when I was initially in the building as a two-star, and knew formally of it in the fall of 2018 when the Leadership Council was briefed with regard to the ongoing effort. It was still in the early stages of fouled anchor when that brief was provided.
So we did get an email from Michael Burkow, the then director of the Coast Guard's Investigative Service, really talking to you about somebody under your command. Mm-hmm. So my guess is over a 5-year investigation, you're investigating individual members of the Coast Guard, having to contact their commanding officers. So I would think the knowledge that there was an investigation going on, maybe not knowing what it was called, was fairly well known throughout the service?
I do not believe it was widely known. I'd say I knew the term, and then as the Pacific Area Commander, one of the O5s of a medium endurance cutter under my command, the CJIS Investigative Services was ready to interview him in conjunction with a fouled anchor case, and I became involved to temporarily relieve him and bring a relief CO in. I do not know the details of the allegation against the individual. I was more focused on keeping that ship operationally ready and providing a relief CO.
So that was probably more of an aberration where you had somebody in command of a ship or something that you had to be concerned about whether you had continuity in command if something had to happen, or?
It was part of the investigative process. We needed to make him available, and then I needed to ensure that I had a commanding officer with clarity and operational intent, and so we brought in a temporary CO as the investigation moved forward with regard to the individual.
But the Coast Guard does have its own investigatory services, correct?
We do.
So why is it you're relying on the Office of Inspector General?
So Coast Guard Investigative Services did the investigations with regard to fouled anchor. When it was announced that this would be subject to an Office of Inspector General, we're now relying on the Office of Inspector General. My CJIS director, though, regularly interacts with the IG because I do have an obligation to continue to investigate new reports of sexual assault, and particularly when they involve active duty members. And we've got an excellent deconfliction process in place between the IG and CJIS so that we can continue to investigate sexual assaults if they're reported.
Have you been interviewed by the Inspector General?
I have not.
Okay, but you're again relying on that Inspector General to investigate, the cover-up of Operation Fouled Anchor?
The IG is looking into fouled anchor, the totality of it, including senior leader action or inaction, and I'm fully cooperating with that.
Okay. I have no further questions. I do know that Senator Hawley was going to show up at 4:45, so.
He's on his way, but while we're waiting, I do have some additional questions. You became aware of Operation Fouled Anchor after the decision was made to withhold it from the Congress, correct?
No, I knew of the fouled anchor investigation in general terms as early as the fall of 2018.
But the specifics, I'm sorry, I was
The
unclear
full
in my question.
extent, the number of victims, the 20,000 hours of investigatory, I did not become aware of that until we had some of the FOIA requests from CNN. And when I saw how expansive it was, it became apparent very quick. I knew we needed to begin to move to report and commit to the committees.
Do you know who made the decision to withhold it?
I don't. We did not disclose. Again, the process that we're going through right now will look at the deliberative process, what was and was not decided with regard to disclosure. The reality is it was not disclosed, and that failed to create the opportunity for Congress to appropriately conduct oversight.
Who was the commandant at the time?
So my predecessor was Admiral Schultz.
Is it your view that he made the decision to withhold it?
I was not in all of the meetings. I know what I was briefed in the fall of 18. I know when we closed it out in 20, there was conversation around whether to disclose or not, and then I don't know.
There are a lot of people watching this hearing who would conclude that maybe you don't want to know. Is that fair?
I am committed to transparency and accountability. I continue to work with the IG, and I believe that investigation will shed light into exactly
But
the
the
questions
IG
that this committee is
investigation may
asking.
never be disclosed. You don't know when it will be done. You do know that Operation Fouled Anchor was withheld. It was concealed. It amounts to a cover-up. You didn't make the decision. You're not implicated. But now you're in command. And I submit very respectfully that you should want to know and that you have a right to know as well as a responsibility. You have said to us that you're going to work with the committee. You haven't made a commitment on disclosure of those quote-unquote sensitive documents, is it your testimony that you will not commit to make them available to the committee?
I have offered, and there is an open commitment to the committee for in-camera review, and will continue to work to be responsive should
But
those documents
you
be-
understand why in-camera review is completely unacceptable, do you not?
I continue to work with my lawyers, the Office of General Counsel, and will continue to be responsive to the committee. Any document is available to the committee. It is a standing and open offer with regard to in-camera review.
I'm told that Senator Hawley is not going to be coming. I have just a few more questions. You know, I'm somewhat astonished that you haven't looked at Shannon Norenberg's submission to this committee. It's available to you. You've read the reports, I'm sure, on CNN about it, correct?
Yes.
I understand she may be here today. I don't know whether she's in the audience. Evidently, she is. Thank you for being here. You described her earlier. Do you have anything to say to Shannon Norenberg?
Shannon was a great employee of the Coast Guard. She's an award-winning advocate for victims of sexual assault, and remain committed to understanding what, with regard to the allegations that she has made, and will work with the committee and others to create transparency and understanding around, again, the allegations.
But one of her requests, and she made very explicit requests to Congress, as well as to you, but to you, one of her very explicit requests was for action. What action are you going to take in response to the statements that she's made?
I am committed to full transparency with regard to the allegations, and will work with, as I said, I know the IG has taken it up. We've got the third-party independent review. I will ensure this is a matter that is also included so we can understand what was known when, and bring clarity to the allegations.
Will you commit to make available the, and I'm quoting her, deliberately withheld VA military sexual trauma benefits and services from the survivors we were sent around to meet with? Will you make that commitment?
Yeah, I will take back through my enterprise victim advocate and others to ensure that we don't have anyone out there that has not been able to avail themselves of veterans benefits, and we'll take that back to ensure that our victims are receiving the support they're entitled to.
Will you commit to entering those reports of sexual assault in the DSAID?
In any case where they need to be entered because we've got a victim, we will ensure that that is happening.
She says, in a question to you, what actions are you going to finally take to do right by these victims you have so horribly mistreated? This official had responsibility for counseling and helping students at the academy that were victims and survivors of sexual assault. She devoted her life and her career to helping them as Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, the SARC, for the academy. This is a position that exists throughout the services. Did she report to you?
No, she did not report to me.
Did she report to the superintendent?
I will get back to the committee on the exact reporting chain at the Coast Guard Academy.
Did you know, or do you know her personally?
I've met her on one occasion in February and find her to just be an incredibly dedicated professional.
Will you read her statement?
I will read her statement.
And will you meet with her?
Yes, as long as the investigative process allows. When that is possible, I will absolutely meet with her.
Let me just say again, and I apologize for repeating, and I mean this without any disrespect. I have a great deal of respect for the investigative process, but you're in charge. And meeting with Shannon Norenberg seems to me about basic decency and wanting to know the truth. And as I said before, what's required of the Coast Guard at this moment is an unsparing commitment to truth-telling, following the facts and the evidence wherever they lead, even if they are embarrassing to former members of the Coast Guard or present members. And that is what serves the interests of the nation as well as the Coast Guard. I am struck by the stories from whistleblowers, and some of them are here today too, how bravely they came forward, some after years of fearing retaliation and being abandoned and traumatized. And the loss was not only to them of a career in the Coast Guard, it was also a loss to the Coast Guard and the country. They were separated from the Coast Guard. In many, many instances, the perpetrators continued in their careers, they assumed positions of command, and they were in no way disciplined. So I want a commitment from you that the action that you're promising will be more than just words or rhetoric, that you will take whatever disciplinary action is appropriate as soon as possible against those perpetrators.
Yeah, I am committed to creating accountability and taking action as that information comes forward.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. I don't know whether you have anything more you'd like to say. I think the victims and survivors might be interested in what you have to say to them. Have you met with them?
I've met with many victims, and again, I am profoundly sorry for the pain and suffering that they've experienced as a result of sexual assault in the Coast Guard. My intent is to create a culture that is intolerant of assault, harassment, hazing, bullying, retaliation, retribution. I want to stop creating victims. And for the victims that we do have in the organization, I am 100% committed to fully supporting them and their needs and ensuring that we continue to stand by them as they experience the
Well,
pain of
in
an
order to
assault.
fulfill that intention, I think this hearing and our investigation has shown that many more specific actions are going to be necessary, both in disclosing documents and other evidence and facts to the public and to this committee, to taking stronger action against retaliation, to implementing all of those 33 recommendations. And I will accept more information from you about which ones that you have completed. A number of other actions that I think are appropriate and necessary. And I don't mean to tell you how to do your job. You're far more qualified than I am, and I don't mean to sound presumptuous. But this committee is investigating for a very immediate and an urgent reason, which is that this problem is not one of the past. It is real and present. It is persistent and unacceptably prevalent. And the evidence is not my voice, it's the voices and faces of the whistleblowers, dozens of them who have come forward, not in the period 1980 to 2006, but in 2024. And I think that they are the most powerful evidence. In fact, they are, in my view, heroes in this story. And I will just add, there are truly courageous and honorable people serving the Coast Guard, and they should be celebrated. Every member of the Coast Guard deserves our thanks and appreciation, and I express it whenever I encounter anyone serving in the Coast Guard and in our military in general. I have just come back from Normandy, literally a day ago, where I was part of the commemoration of D-Day, the 80th anniversary, and spoke to veterans, walked through the American cemetery, as well as Omaha Beach, where men gave their lives. They were kids. They were boys 17 and 18 years old who had never left their homes before. They jumped off a landing barge into 8 feet of water under a hail of machine gun bullets, mortar fire. 90% of them perished in the first wave, 80% in the second wave. They had to run on Omaha Beach, a length 3 football fields long. Members of our military raised their right hand to perform those kinds of acts if necessary. Every member of the Coast Guard does. And I immensely respect their continuing service. And what I want to see, and I know you do too, is a Coast Guard that is worthy of that service and sacrifice. What the Coast Guard needs to do now, I think, is respond to what it's heard with real action, as well as compassion and honesty. And when a Coast Guard member of the Academy or anyone in the fleet needs help, they should be given it, and they should be given the credibility that they deserve when they make complaints. So we will be watching. We will be issuing a preliminary report. I hope that report will include the benefit of those documents that have been withheld. And we're going to hold this record open for 15 days for submission of statements or questions from the record from my colleagues, and hope you will respond to them. Thank you very much. With that, this hearing is adjourned.